tomorrow marks 10 years since the 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by a neighborhood watchman, George Zimmerman. For the purposes of our discussion today, the Trayvon Martin case really begins our timeline of Black history in the making. So let's go through it. In 2012, Trayvon Martin was walking along in his neighborhood when he came across George Zimmerman, who believed that he was acting suspiciously. Two engaged in a confrontation, ending with Zimmerman shooting and killing Martin. George Zimmerman claimed self-defense and was acquitted of second-degree murder charges in July of 2013. A year later, in July 2014, the death of Eric Garner was captured on cell phone video. Garner was pinned to the ground and put in an illegal chokehold during an arrest by several NYPD officers. Garner cried out, "I can't breathe," 11 times before he died, and none of the officers involved faced criminal charges. A month later, in August of 2014, 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot and killed by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri, sparking violent protests. The officer there was never charged. In March of 2020, 26-year-old Breonna Taylor was fatally shot in her own apartment by Louisville police officers serving a no-knock warrant. None of the officers were charged in her death. On May 5th, 2020, cell phone video of Ahmaud Arbery being chased and gunned down by 3 white men goes viral. For months, the men responsible avoid prosecution as local law enforcement either saw nothing wrong with their actions or sought to cover it up. May 25th, 2020, the death of George Floyd, also captured on viral video. Now, this would shock the world and spark worldwide protests calling for sweeping changes in law enforcement. And then on April 11th, 2021, police body camera footage captured the death of 20-year-old Daunte Wright. Wright was shot by former police officer Kim Potter, who claimed that she mistook her gun for her taser. Earlier this month, Potter was convicted of manslaughter charges and sentenced to just 2 years in prison. So where are we now as a nation? Are we in the midst of a movement? Is this the moment to effect real change? Will our children's children say the names of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor? I am honored now to welcome our panel of guests for this evening. I want to begin by welcoming the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Of course, he is a renowned civil rights activist and political leader and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition in Chicago. He worked alongside the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the battle for civil rights. And Reverend Jackson, to this day, remains on the front lines in the fight for social justice. Also with me, Mark O'Mara. Mark O'Mara represented George Zimmerman, the man accused in the killing of Trayvon Martin. He is a longtime advocate for changing state and national laws, resulting in over-prosecution for African Americans. And Mark also represents those injured or killed by law enforcement throughout the country. Also with me, trial attorney C.K. Hoffler. She's been at the forefront of the civil rights struggle for years as counsel for the Reverend Jackson and his organization. She has received various National Bar Association presidential awards, including the organization's prestigious Governor's Award. All right, so thank you guys all for joining me so much this evening. I truly appreciate it. Reverend, I want to begin with you because you're someone who has a tremendous perspective on the civil rights struggle. Going back to the 1960s, really probably the most important part of the struggle here for civil rights. I want to get your perspective on what's been happening now in light of what we see going on between the police and the community, some of the changes that we've seen. Is this in fact a movement? How would you term what's been going on right now?
Well, what's happening in Georgia is a movement, not an aberration. My concern now is that it's old in the 60s. In 1896, they ruled apartheid. Separated blacks from whites, and white and blacks could not vote. So we couldn't serve on juries. So we're 58 years without able to go to court. Emmett Till was killed. That was a wake-up call, but there was nothing illegal about it in some sense. Now, today we're taking the position, we live in our faith, we live under the law. Under the law, the law must be enforced in terms of why Biden appointed Judge Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court as nominee to step in the right direction.
Fair enough. I just want to say that civil rights attorney Ben Crump is joining us now by a phone. Of course, Ben Crump has represented the families of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, and he has been called the Attorney General for Black America. Ben, let me get to you really quickly. Again, thanks for joining me tonight. I want to get your perspective. You are the ultimate insider in all of this. The first time I remember hearing of you was in that Trayvon Martin case, and now yours is the first number folks call when they have issues with police or problems with municipalities. I want to get your perspective on what's been going on, the changes we're seeing. Is in fact Black history being made right now?
Absolutely, Michael, and I'm honored to join this august panel that you have this evening. When you think about just this week, when you saw the historic verdict in the case of the killers of Ahmaud Arbery being convicted of a federal hate crime, the first time in Georgia's history. And then we saw that the other three officers were convicted in Minnesota for violating the civil rights of George Floyd, both in the same week. And then on top of that, C.K. Hoffa, today we see the first Black woman, my dear friend Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, nominated to the Supreme Court. We are definitely making progress. However, we still have a long way to go. I still think about Breonna Taylor, the sister who was in her own apartment and her body mutilated with 9 bullets, Reverend Jackson, while she was practically naked. And Mark, they busted open the front door at 1 o'clock in the morning, serving one of these no-knock warrants that are disproportionately executed on African Americans everywhere you see them being executed on. So we have work to do. And the final thing I would say is Trayvon Martin's legacy. Reverend Jackson, as you know, you were there, raised the consciousness level in America, the awareness of the plight of the implicit bias in making sure that African Americans have equal opportunity at liberty and justice for all. But his legacy, I believe in all these historic victories, looms large. He is our generation's Emmett Till.
All right, Mark O'Mara, you were in the middle of that storm, the Trayvon Martin case. You represented George Zimmerman, of course. Now, I've gotten to know you. You've been on my show many, many times. I know what an advocate you are for accountability on behalf of police and all municipalities and things of that nature. But I want to take you back to representing George Zimmerman. And again, I agree with Ben. I see that as sort of the beginning of this consciousness. And you were on a different side at that time. Maybe you can help us understand if you understood some of the anger that was coming forth and what that was like for you.
So sure. First, I just have to say I am beyond honored to be on the same panel with Reverend Jackson. I don't want to age either one of us, but I was a young kid watching him do what he started doing back in the 60s. I grew up in New York. And of course, Al Sharpton as well. CK, of course, a phenomenal lawyer. Ben, an attorney who in the past 10 years has moved the needle more than any other attorney, not just in the past 10 years, but that I know of, to move the civil rights, particularly on behalf of young Black males, forward. But having said that, you know, I used to say, look at my pedigree when people ask me why I represented George Zimmerman, because I've represented literally hundreds and hundreds of young Black males in the system. But I wasn't as aware as I have become over the past 10 years of how insidious it was. I knew it on behalf of individual clients and therefore knew it on behalf of the system. But I think it was the Trayvon Martin death and the afterglow of it. And again, people like Ben, who really made that the kindling sort of come to fire. And even though I agree with Ben, we have a long, long way to go, I do think that in the past 10 years, we have made significant strides. We would never have gotten these convictions that have happened in the past couple of years, certainly without body cams, videos, and an awareness that is going to be in the Klieg lights of the media forevermore.
CK, I want to go to you, and you're last, but certainly not least, CK, so forgive me for that. But, you know, Mark raises an interesting point. I think the key to what we're seeing happening right now is about that awareness and that consciousness. I think black folks have taken it to the point where people who perhaps weren't aware of what was going on, folks like yourself, Reverend Jackson, Ben Crump, anyone growing up black in America was aware. But I think now there's an awareness that goes beyond just the black community. Your attempt to put in perspective the last 10 years in these cases that we've seen.
Well, the last 10 years have been critical in terms of advancing the cause of civil rights and justice. We all stand on the shoulders of Reverend Jackson, who I've had the pleasure of representing for 35 years, almost my entire legal career. And the last 10 years, what we saw in terms of criminal justice cases, social justice cases, cameras have played a critical difference. If we look at the difference between Trayvon Martin's case, George Floyd's case, and Daunte Wright's case, the difference is Daunte Wright and George Floyd's case were captured on video. The power of the video, the power of people actually seeing, the world seeing, and that video footage being released cannot be understated. Because I would dare say, had there been real, reliable video camera footage in the Trayvon Martin case, perhaps, and I know I've got Mr. Zimmerman's attorney here, but perhaps that may have made a difference. And so I think that's one point. But then secondly, having extraordinary leaders like Reverend Jackson and other civil rights leaders, Transformative Justice Coalition, certainly Al Sharpton as well as many, many others, not relenting, refusing to be denied, fighting day in and day out for voting rights, for civil rights, for social justice, has made a huge difference. There are so many organizations, women's organizations, black women's organizations, Win with Black Women, for instance, the Black Women Roundtable, all kinds of organizations that are on point each and every day and who make it their singular mission to advance the cause of civil rights. And all of that convergence of these factors, along with the world seeing the footage, pressure of the international community on the United States saying you've got to do better, United Nations commissions condemning the actions of the police officers with the George Floyd murder, and on and on and on. I think, Michael, all of those things have played a critical role, so we find ourselves here today. But it starts with Dr. King, Reverend Jackson, and all of those magnificent soldiers whose shoulders we stand on, who made a difference and who continue to make a difference every single day.